Welcome, students. I am Nancy Southerland. I'm eager to begin the discussion of Chapter 2, Decision Making. Chapter 2 explains how consumers go about making decisions. When a consumer such as yourself begins the thoughts of purchasing a product, many decisions are made. Have you really ever considered how many decisions that you make regarding purchases you make? In Chapter 2 lecture, I will discuss 4 learning objectives. They are as follows. The 3 categories of consumer decision making are cognitive, habitual, and affective. A cognitive purchasing decision is the outcome of a series of stages that results in the selection of one product over competing options. Objectives 3 and 4 are: we often fall back on well-learned rules of thumb to make decisions. We make some decisions on the basis of an emotional reaction rather than the outcome of a rational thought. The first learning objective in this chapter points out that consumers make decisions in different ways. These decisions are made in response to a problem that each consumer feels. Some of our decisions are highly rational. Some are irrational. Others are made by habit. Still others are made on the basis of emotion. Some decisions take a long time to make, and others take just a few seconds. Thus, the 3 categories of consumer decision making are cognitive, habitual, and affective. Students, we can consider the 3 types of decision making as buckets. This image illustrates the 3 buckets of decision making: cognitive, habitual, and affective. Cognitive means of or relating to cognition, with cognition meaning the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and the senses. In other words, cognition means really thinking something through. Habitual refers to being regular, usual, or constantly done as a habit. Lastly, affective is a psychology word and means relating to moods, feelings, and attitudes. Let us self-reflect in our role as consumers. Please assess which bucket you lean towards most. It is critical for the well-being of all stakeholders that we do more cognitive, deliberate, rational, sequential decisions versus habitual, behavioral, unconscious, automatic, and affective, emotional, instantaneous. Too many decisions are made in the habitual and affective buckets and bring negative externalities upon others as well as the decision maker. The popular culture is a strong driver in decision making, and in many circumstances must be negated with a more cognitive approach to decision making. Students, before we explore the 3 types of decision making, we need to first ask why different consumers may approach the same choice situation from very different perspectives. This is critical in a marketer's understanding. One reason is the consumer's level of involvement in the decision. Involvement is a person's perceived relevance of the object or connectedness to the object based on their inherent needs, values, and interests. An object in the generic sense, too, refers to a product, brand, ad, or purchase situation. Figure 2.2 illustrates how we can conceptualize the construct of involvements in terms of its antecedents and possible results. Table 2.1 illustrates a scale that consumer researchers can use to measure involvement. Marketers want you and me to be highly involved with a product, thereby exhibiting the characteristics of much brand loyalty. Students, there are 3 types of involvement: Product involvement is a consumer's level of interest in a particular product. As a rule, product decisions are likely to be highly involving if the consumer believes there is perceived risk. The greater the risk, the greater the involvement by the consumer. Message involvement refers to the influence media vehicles have on the consumers. Print is a high medium involvement, while television tends to be considered a low medium involvement. Did you know this before this course in consumer behavior? Situational involvement takes place with a store, website, or a location where people consume a product or service. One way to increase this kind of involvement is to personalize the messages shoppers receive at the time of purchase. Students, I love the impact that this picture has. As a general rule, purchase decisions that are perceived as risky will involve more extensive searches. Risk is felt when there is a belief that there may be a negative consequence associated with the decision. Minolta addresses this fear created by a sense of risk by offering a guarantee. As I stated earlier, the greater the risk, the greater the involvement by the consumer. Thus, students, risk can be categorized as the following. Monetary risk occurs when making a poor choice will have a monetary consequence. Any purchase that costs a lot is subject to this risk. Functional risk is the risk that the product may not function as the consumer needs. Physical risk is the risk that the choice may physically threaten the consumer. Social risk is the risk that the choice will reflect poorly on the consumer and damage his or her self-esteem or confidence. Psychological risk is the risk that one may lose self-respect due to making a bad decision. For instance, expensive luxury goods could cause the consumer to feel extensive guilt. Students, this figure illustrates the 5 types of risk along with the purchases that are likely to be associated with each form of risk. Monetary risk is associated with high-ticket items like a car purchase. Functional risk is associated with products that must perform in order to satisfy. Pharmaceutical products are examples of product choices associated with physical risk. Symbolic goods tend to be associated with social risk. Personal luxuries can be associated with psychological risk. Students, I would suppose that many of us are really concerned with our social status. We do not want to lose social status. The social risk is the risk of losing social status. Have you ever felt that you had body odor? This Right Guard ad points out the social risk of underarm odor. Consumers are delighted when Charmin sponsors clean toilet facilities at major events. Consumers are then both product involved and situationally involved with Charmin's tissue paper. Thus, at major events, product and situational involvement can overlap. Students, all of us are consumers. Now it is time for a reflection exercise. Consider purchases you have made that reflect the 5 kinds of risk: monetary risk, functional risk, physical risk, social risk, psychological risk. What risky products have you considered lately? Which forms of risk were involved? Students, I want to discuss Learning Objective 2, stating that a cognitive purchasing decision is the outcome of a series of stages that result in the selection of one product over competing options. This is the type of decision making that I feel serves us individually and collectively in a greater capacity. Furthermore, consumer researchers have approached decision making from an information processing perspective. According to this view, people calmly and carefully integrate as much information as possible with what they already know about a product, weigh the pluses and minuses of each alternative, and arrive at a satisfactory decision. The economics of information perspective assumes that we collect just as much data as we need to make an informed decision. Students, I want us to meditate upon this slide, as it is very valuable in our day-to-day life as we make decisions. These are the basic 4 steps in the decision-making process, shown in Figure 2.5. The next several slides provide more details on these steps. Problem recognition occurs when we experience a significant difference between the current state of affairs and some state we desire. Information search is the process by which we survey the environment for data to make a reasonable decision. In the third stage, the consumer evaluates the alternatives. Then a choice is made. The choice may be from among product choices as well as to not buy or buy. This figure illustrates the 4 steps in decision making that we discussed in our last slide with an example about Richard. The decision making has outcome of Richard bringing home the TV and enjoying his purchase. Problem recognition is the first stage in the decision-making process. It can occur when a consumer's state of being declines, which then triggers a desire to return to normalcy, or when a consumer recognizes an ideal state he or she wishes to achieve. In this Dutch ad, the child's parents recognize a need to go to the movies. In essence, because of the intense sacrifice that many perceive a baby, they feel the need to go to the movies to escape. Students, this figure is really easy to grasp, as it illustrates the 2 causes of problem recognition. The person experiences a decline in the quality of his actual state, or an increase in the desire for his ideal state. I am now ready for us to do another reflection exercise. Having considered the plethora of choices available to us, is it a problem that we as consumers have too many choices? Would it be better to have less choices? How does it affect consumer decision making? Once we know we have a problem, we search out how we can solve the problem, students. These searches will typically take place before purchase, i.e. pre-purchase. However, many people just enjoy searching information, and they conduct ongoing searches even if a purchase is not immediately forthcoming. Internal searches are based on our own memory banks, while external sources come from other sources. Search engines have made vast amount of information available to us as we search out product information. We may rely on cybermediaries to help narrow and filter the options that are available. Intelligent agents are sophisticated software programs that use collaborative filtering technologies to learn from past user behavior in order to recommend new purchases. This figure shows us that there is an inverted U relationship between knowledge and external search effort. People with very limited expertise may not feel that they are competent to search extensively. Experts have a better sense of what information is relevant, so they engage in selective search. Novice consumers tend to process information in terms of the big picture instead of detailed information. Who searches the most? Moderately knowledgeable consumers. The alternatives a consumer knows about is the evoke set. The ones actually consider make up the consideration set. In this ad for Sunkist lemons, the goal is to illustrate lemons as a possible alternative to salt. Students, how do we categorize products in our minds? We cognitively represent information we have about products in knowledge structures. The term refers to a set of beliefs and the ways we organize these beliefs in our own minds. These structures matter to marketers because we need to ensure consumers are categorizing product information correctly. We typically represent a product in a cognitive structure at one of the three levels. The subordinate category often includes individual brands. The superordinate category is more abstract. The middle level is the basic level. It is the most useful for classifying products. It groups things together based on commonalities, but still permit a broad range of alternatives. Students, I would ask you to do another reflection exercise. Consider a situation in which you searched for information deliberately and one in which you had developed product knowledge incidentally. How would you say the various information search affected your decision? When evaluating alternatives, consumers may focus on one or two product features while ignoring others. This helps us narrow down our options. Evaluative criteria are the dimensions we use to judge the merits of competing options. Determinant attributes are the features that we actually use to differentiate among our choices. Marketers often educate consumers about which criteria they should use as determinant attributes. The rank on the determinant attribute is what causes the consumer to choose. Students' product choice is the fourth step in cognitive decision-making process. In this stage, the consumer decides. There are decision rules that may guide our choices. When we need to use more consideration before making a decision, an extensive problem, we can categorize our decision rules into compensatory and non-compensatory. Non-compensatory decision rules suggest that a product that is low on one attribute cannot compensate for that weakness with a strength on another attribute. Heuristics helps us to make efficient decisions. In this ad, the character is using a heuristic. She wants only Yato items for her party. Some choices we make just on the basis of routine, with little or no conscious effort. In fact, the most of the external research we do for small products is surprisingly small. Cues in the environment may make us more likely to react in certain ways. This is known as priming. Subtle changes in a consumer's environment can change a behavior, and this is known as a nudge. The default bias is where we are more likely to comply with the requirement than to make the effort to not comply. Cognitive decision making seeks a maximizing solution, but oftentimes consumers are happy to exert less energy for decisions in exchange for a satisficing solution. This good enough perspective on decision making is called bounded rationality. The study of decisions is called behavioral economics. Many of these decisions illustrate the principles of mental accounting. The way we categorize products has a lot of strategic implications. That's because the process affects which the product consumers will compare to our product and also the criteria they use to decide which brand they like. The success of a positioning strategy hinges on the marketer's ability to convince the consumer to consider its product within a given category. At the abstract, superordinate level, many different product forms compete for membership. The characteristic of categories exemplars tend to exert a disproportionate influence on how people think of the category in general. The brands that are strongly associated with a category get to define the criteria we use to evaluate all category members. Product categorization can affect consumers' expectations regarding the places they can locate a desired product. Let us discuss heuristics. Heuristics are mental shortcuts. Covariation infers hidden dimensions of products from attributes we observe. The signal communicates an underlying quality. For instance, someone selling a used car will try to make the car look clean because cleanliness may be associated with reliability. Furthermore, country of origin is often a determinant attribute in the decision-making process. Consumers think of Switzerland for precision in watches, Italy for leather goods, and France for wine. Familiar brand names can also serve as shortcuts, as can higher prices, which consumers may assume suggest a higher quality. Students, this slide is for reflection. Think of some of the common country of origin effects. Example, watches, wine. Which one affects your consumer choices? What could brands from other countries do to compete such effects? Let us discuss learning objective 4. We make some decisions on the basis of an emotional reaction rather than as the outcome of a rational thought process. Students, I would ask you again to engage in reflection. When have you made a high involvement decision on the basis of effect? Were you in the maximizing mode or satisficing mode? In this chapter, we focused on 4 learning objectives. We learned the 3 categories of consumer decisions. We learned the stages in the cognitive decision-making process. Students, I want to recap the learning objectives for Chapter 2 as I end my lecture. The 3 categories of consumer decision-making are cognitive, habitual, and affective. A cognitive purchasing decision is the outcome of a series of stages that results in the selection of one product over competing options. We learned common heuristics consumers use in decision making. We discussed the role of affect in making decisions. We often fall back on well-learned rules of thumb to make decisions. We make some decisions on the basis of an emotional reaction rather than as the outcome of a rational thought process. Thank you for listening to my lecture of Consumer Behavior Chapter 2, entitled Decision Making. I am Nancy Southerland. I am eager to engage you.